Welcome to the Clinical File. I'm John Cordray, and I'm a licensed professional counselor. And this is my mental health analysis of the Minnesota ICE shooting case of the man shot in the leg. These are my speculations. It's not a diagnosis of anyone involved in this case. And this report is strictly focused on the psychological indicators in my mental health analysis only. I'm not excusing actions, but I'm simply explaining them psychologically. Have you ever wondered how years of living through economic collapse and violence could make someone see a simple police stop as a threat to their very survival? This question strikes at the heart of what might drive a person to flee and fight back in a moment of confrontation. Stick with me as we examine the evidence from migrant experiences that show how deep-seated fear can override rational choices, potentially leading to dangerous escalations like the one we're discussing right now. On the evening of January 14, 2026, in North Minneapolis, federal agents from Immigration and Customs Enforcement traffic stop on a Venezuelan man who had entered the United States in 2022. The man, described by authorities as being in the country illegally, drove away from the stop, crashed into a parked car, and then fled on foot. Agents caught up to him, and a struggle ensued. Two other individuals emerged from a nearby apartment and joined the altercation, reportedly attacking the agent with a snow shovel and a broom handle. The Venezuelan man allegedly broke free and participated in the assault as well. Fearing for his life, the agent fired his weapon, striking the man in the leg. The injury was non-life-threatening, and the man was taken to the hospital. The agent was also hospitalized for injuries sustained in the attack, and the two other individuals were taken into custody after barricading themselves inside the apartment. This event unfolded on the 600 block of 24th Avenue North, about 4.5 miles from where another ICE-related shooting had occurred just a week earlier. As a counselor, I look at behaviors like fleeing and resisting not just isolated actions, but as possible responses shaped by prior experiences. For many Venezuelan migrants, the journey to the U.S. begins long before crossing the border, rooted in a homeland plagued by instability. Several economic and political crises since around 2015, leading to hyperinflation, shortages of food and medicine, and widespread violence. Millions have fled, seeking safety and opportunity elsewhere. In the U.S., Venezuelan migrants often face ongoing uncertainty due to their immigration status, which can heighten vigilance and reactivity in encounters with law enforcement. Could chronic exposure to instability back home prime someone to interpret authority figures as immediate dangers? The first psychological red flag here is pre-migration trauma and violence and scarcity. It might explain why routine interactions can spiral so quickly. Studies show that individuals who have lived through societal breakdowns often develop a heightened threat of perception, where even neutral situations feel perilous. In this case, the man's decision to drive away could stem from a survival instinct honed in an environment where trusting officials meant risk. We see this in how many migrants report past encounters with corrupt or abusive authorities in their home countries. Layered on top is the stress of migration itself, which for Venezuelans can involve routes through multiple countries, facing exploitation or harm along the way. Once in the U.S., the fear of deportation looms large, especially those without legal protections. This man entered during a period when border policies allowed some to enter, with releases pending hearings. But recent enforcement surges have intensified anxieties. Psychologically, this creates a state of hyperarousal, where the body's fight or flight system is constantly on alert. When the agents approached, his response might have been an automatic bid for escape, driven by accumulated stress rather than deliberate defiance. Now consider the involvement of the two bystanders, arming themselves with household items. From a behavioral perspective, this could reflect a communal response, where seeing a fellow migrant in distress triggers solidarity born from shared hardships. Venezuelan communities in the U.S. often form tight networks for support, as isolation is common due to language barriers and cultural differences. But this solidarity can sometimes manifest in protective actions that escalate situations. Is it possible that witnessing the struggle activated their own unresolved fears, leading to an impulsive intervention? This second red flag, group dynamics influenced by shared trauma, highlights how collective experiences can amplify individual reactions. Research on migrant groups indicate that when people feel marginalized as a community, they may band together against perceived threats, even if it increases personal risk. Tensions were already high following the fatal shooting by an ICE agent on January 7, 2026. That incident involved a U.S. citizen killed during an immigration operation, sparking protests and debates over federal tactics. Local officials disputed the federal account of that event, claiming video evidence showed the car moving slowly, not aggressively. The community was already on edge, with demonstrations all across the city against increased ICE presence. Governor Tim had just addressed the state, criticizing federal agents and urging residents to document encounters. This atmosphere of distrust could have fueled the bystanders' decision to get involved. Psychologically, living in a heightened state of community alert can lower the threshold for aggressive responses. People may see law enforcement not as protectors, but as enforcers of separation and loss. For Venezuelan migrants, this resonates deeply, as many have left families behind or fear raids that could tear them apart. The man's irregular status likely compounded his panic. Released into the U.S. in 2022 under previous policies, he faced potential removal under newer enforcement priorities. A return to Venezuela, where conditions remain dire, can provoke desperate measures. Venezuela's crisis includes political repression, with reports of arbitrary arrest and torture. Migrants often carry memories of such abuses. Third psychological red flag is the fear of deportation linked to past persecution. It can manifest in intense avoidance behaviors. In counseling, I've seen how this fear distorts decision-making, turning flight into reflex. The assault with improvised weapons suggests a moment of raw emotion. The snow shovel and the broom handle were likely grabbed in haste, indicating unplanned action. From a mental health standpoint, this points to dysregulation, where stress overwhelms coping mechanisms. Venezuelan migrants report high rates of PTSD, with symptoms like hypervigilance and irritability. One study found that up to 31% of Venezuelans in the U.S. show signs of PTSD higher than the general populations. Triggers like a sudden stop by armed agents could evoke flashbacks to violent encounters back home. Why might this lead to violence against the officer? Perhaps it's a maladaptive survival strategy where fighting back feels like the only option. Psychological red flag is PTSD-triggered aggression. Underscores how untreated trauma can result in harmful outbursts. The community context adds yet another layer. Minneapolis has seen a surge in federal agents, with over 2,000 deployed amid immigration crackdowns. Local leaders, including Mayor Jacob Frey, have criticized these operations as overreach. Protests after the Good shooting spread nationwide, with clashes in other cities. In this environment, migrants may feel under siege, fostering a psychology of resistance. For the Venezuelan man, being targeted could have felt like confirmation of his worst fears. His crash into a parked car during escape shows poor judgment under pressure, possibly due to panic. Venezuelan migrants, with rates of around 23% in some samples. Symptoms including racing thoughts and impaired concentration, which could explain erratic driving. This fifth psychological red flag is anxiety-induced impulsivity. It might clarify why he didn't stop it. The two assistants' actions raise questions about bystander psychology. High-stress communities seeing a fellow migrant restrained can evoke empathy mixed with rage. Shared identity as Venezuelans in a foreign land strengthens bonds, but also amplifies reactions. Research on collective trauma show how groups internalize injustices, leading to unified but risky responses. might have viewed the scene through a lens of past oppressions. Venezuelans' history of protest against government forces could have conditioned such interventions. The sixth psychological red flag is collective trauma fostering defensive alliances. It helps explain their involvement. After the shooting, the two barricaded themselves, suggesting continued fear. The man was hospitalized, stable, but injured. The officer, too, required medical care for assault wounds. Psychologically, this incident illustrates escalation cycles and enforcement encounters. For migrants with trauma histories, perceived threats can lead to resistance, prompting force, which reinforces fears. Breaking this requires understanding root causes. Many Venezuelan migrants endure pre-migration hardships like poverty and insecurity, increasing vulnerability to disorders. One's here, cultural stress, adapting to new norms while facing discrimination, exasperates issues. Discrimination predicts worse outcomes, like depression in 39 to 41% of some groups. The seventh psychological red flag is post-migration discrimination, which heightens isolation. It could have played a role in a man's mindset. Finally, consider the motives beyond survival. Some migrants turn to networks for protection, but this can lead to confrontations. The why here may tie to preserving dignity amid loss. Leaving Venezuela often means abandoning careers, homes, and identities. In the U.S., irregular status means living in the shadows, always alert. The eighth and final red flag here is the loss of identity fueling defiance. It might drive resistance as a way to reclaim control. Weaving these factors, the incident appears not as a random violence, but as a confluence of psychological pressures. The man's fight and flight could have stemmed from ingrained survival modes, and the helper's actions reflect the communal bonds under strain. Broader contexts of enforcement and protest amplified these tensions. As a counselor, I speculate that these elements contributed to the escalation, and understanding this helps prevent future incidents through trauma-informed approaches. Law enforcement training and de-escalation with traumatized populations can make a huge difference. For migrants, access to mental health services is crucial. Many Venezuelan arrivals need support for PTSD, anxiety, and depression. Community programs addressing cultural stress can also build resilience. This case highlights how unaddressed mental health in migrant populations intersects with policy, leading to tragic outcomes. Reflecting on behaviors, we see patterns common to forced migration. Economic despair in Venezuela pushes people out, but arrival brings new challenges. Fear becomes a constant companion, shaping interactions. In moments like this targeted traffic stop, that fear can erupt. The psychological toll extends to communities, fostering division. Protests after this shooting involved clashes with agents using irritants, and this cycles even more trauma. Breaking this trauma requires empathy and compassion from all sides. For the individuals involved, recovery involves processing events. The man, now facing charges, likely deals with the physical and emotional wounds. The officer contends with the aftermath of using force. Speculating on motives, the why centers on survival amid layered stressors, not excusing actions, but explaining them psychologically. This understanding fosters compassion. We all need compassion, don't we? And our nation needs compassion right now. Cases like this remind us that migration is about human beings, and it's fraught with a lot of pain and trauma. And with that trauma and pain and migration, looking at it through a mental health lens reveals depths that are often overlooked. Cases like this is mounting. The division with so many people that have so many different opinions is so far and widespread here. It's a tragic, no matter what side you take, and I'm not taking sides here. I'm not pushing blame on anybody. I'm just simply looking at the mental health indicators of what led to this and what's leading to this, and offer some hope of how to work through this. These are human beings that we're talking about here. It's easy to classify people as illegal immigrants, but they're human beings too. They fled their country for a reason. I'm not excusing their actions. I'm not saying that they should be allowed. They have to go through the process. But I understand why they're here. If we were going through the same thing here in the U.S. and we fled to another country, you might think differently. These are human beings. The ICE agents and the officers are human beings. They have a job to do. And when we see snippets in the reports and we make these impulsive reactions one way or the other, that divides a nation. We cannot be divided here. We have to be united and come together and address this from a mental health perspective. That's why I'm doing this. And I think it's so important to address this with compassion and to be able to identify, yes, it's tragic. Yes, it's a problem. And yes, we need to do something about it. Maybe there's another answer. Maybe there's another way to think about this. So what did you think about this case? Were there any elements about this story that stood out to you? If you want more mental health analysis of stories like this one, be sure to subscribe for more. And if you found this case compelling, be sure to watch this next story. It will make you more aware of your surroundings. Thank you for joining me today. Until next time, stay curious, stay safe.